Welcome to the A to Z Jobs podcast, where we explore the diverse career paths that shape our professional lives. I'm your host, Nate, and today we're diving into the inspiring journey of Ted, a leadership and executive coach specializing in sales and communication training. From recovering finance professional to global facilitator, Ted shares how he found his passion for coaching, the challenges of transitioning to running his own business, and the tools that keep him grounded. Whether you're considering a career pivot or just looking for some motivation, this episode is packed with insights and actionable advice. Let's get started. Tell us about your career and what inspires you to pursue it.
Thanks, Nate. So I appreciate you having me on the podcast today. I'm really excited to talk about my career journey. What led me to this? So I'm currently a executive and leadership coach, and I also do a lot of facilitation work with certain psychometric tools. How did I get here? So I was a former recovering finance professional, if you will, doing a lot of product strategy for financial services companies, and came to Hong Kong about 6 years ago to basically do more sales enablement work to try to get more sales or revenue for our company within the region. And so my side job within this whole company was to do a lot of this tool that we call Lumina Spark that basically allows people or helps people figure out ways to build rapport and communicate effectively with each other. And so it's kind of like a Myers-Briggs type of tool, but what it does is it builds self-awareness around people's personality, communication styles, things like that. And I managed to be able to travel all around the world and all the different offices within my company, trained over almost like 2,000 folks within my company. And I realized this kind of work was what was getting me out of bed in the morning, if you will. So after I left this job, I just decided to pursue this a little more, given that this was the thing that I was enjoying a lot. So started my own business like you, and have started a coaching business and a facilitation business from there.
Fantastic. That's a bit of a journey. So tell me more about how you got here in terms of training and education. What
Mhm.
did you have to pursue to get there?
Well, the psychometric tool, the Lumina Spark tool, required a little bit of certification as a practitioner. So that was about 3 or 4 days understanding the background. It's a Jungian type of psychological assessment tool. So you had to understand a lot about the backgrounds of all these different things. So, and then you basically get after doing a bit of practice and being observed, they set you out there. So this was 10 years ago, and so I kind of know it like the back of my hand now. For coaching, I have you to thank actually for this, because I was actually looking into coaching programs as well, because it was something that I was really interested in. Managing teams within my company was pretty was fulfilling for me, if you will. And so I felt like, being a mentor and being a manager was something I wanted to sort of lean on, if you will. So coaching was the obvious choice. And so um, you were able to suggest this Australian firm called the Institute of Executive Coaching and Learning and Leadership, IECL. And so I was able to sort of get certified with them. And so at this moment, hopefully by this summer, I should be accredited with the International Coaching Federation. So there's a bit of a process for coaching, if you will. You have to sort of have 100 training hours or paid hours to coach someone. You go through a bunch of education, and but after a while, once you get certified, you're good to go, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. I'm happy. I'm happy to take a bit of credit in your journey.
Mm-hmm.
So, talk to me about the things you love. Then, so you've briefly mentioned already. So it's that mentoring mindset and the ability to help people achieve their goals. Is that the best part? Is there any other things you'd like to highlight in terms of best parts of the career?
Well, I mean, I've always wanted to help people. I mean, in my younger years, I thought about becoming a doctor and trying to, study medicine, and that whole idea was really about, wanting to help people and things like that. And then after a while, I just, the sight of blood just got to me, which is why I didn't pursue it. So, but I imagine that I've always had this wanting and desire to help people, but at the same time, my personality tends to be very direct. So in many ways, I find that the kind of coaching I do is very, I think there's a term for it, relatively confrontational coaching, if you will. It's kind of, so the style that I tend to have is I'd shine a mirror on someone and basically say, well, you just said this and you just said this. I'm putting a mirror to you and saying, well, these two don't make sense to me. Why they're kind of maybe in conflict. They're conflicting with each other, right? So maybe, could you explain this to me? And that actually is effective for, I guess, a certain personality, right? Um, but I think part of it is also trying to help people solve these different problems. I, as a coach, should not be solving people's problems, obviously, but but I'm helping out these people, bringing them to their conclusion, and it's fulfilling for me to be able to sort of see growth, and being able to see them, grow into a different sort of way of thinking, if you will.
Fantastic. So, what's the challenges? What are you hating? What's preventing you? What's the worst part about this?
Well, transitioning from your corporate nine to five to running your own business, as you know, is probably it takes a bit of adjustment, if you will. The headaches that you get from like the everyday 9 to 5, which are mostly probably corporate politics related, you don't really encounter that, when you're running your own business and becoming a coach. Although some of the topics are about that, and I can speak eloquently to a lot of those. But the I guess what I appreciated about the corporate 9 to 5 is having that steady paycheck and being able to know where where the direct deposit into my account that is coming from the company. And so doing this it's a little nerve wracking. It's a different type of stress, So, and being able to sort of manage that stress is something that has been a learning process for me at the same time. But the other things I try to do to manage that is I've done a lot more, conjuring and meditation and believing and things like that, and which seems very off-brand for someone like me, but it's actually been helpful, and I highly encourage people. There's one podcast I think on Spotify that someone recommended that was, it's about 10 minutes of meditation every day. I highly recommend just actually doing that and conjuring and visualizing your success. And even a person like me who's a skeptic, found a lot of benefit from that.
Yeah, I agree completely. One of the challenges I found is now that I work from home, I'm needing to force myself to actually take those breaks. Whereas when you had the 9 to 5, you commute, you could meditate, you could read, but now you got to force those moments, make those moments happen.
I,
But
I
without them,
think when you talk about that, that's interesting because, I think many of your listeners probably know this. Like when you have the 9 to 5 and you have that sort of thing, um, you're not really pressured, or you're not really prompted to think of something different about your own career sometimes, because you're just kind of on cruise control for a while, right? It takes some sort of shift or change to actually make you think about that, right? And so I think what I would encourage your listeners to do is, you know try to try to imagine your life as if your everyday sort of routine that you're used to, what if it was gone, right? And then what would you do afterwards? What would be the thing that you would point to, right? And so I think that kind of exercise, while might be scary for some, I think it's a really good way to a risk assessment strategy, if you will, just so that you're able to do that. I remember in my journey as well, taking a seminar about retirement, about seeing what would happen. And I realized that I'm not going to be at that point. I wasn't going to be a really good retiree because I didn't have enough to fill my day. So I think that was also what prompted a lot of the sort of pursuits that I was doing. Was all right. Well, if I'm going to be doing this now, I'm not saying I'm retired at all. Not the slightest. I think I want to be able to fill my days with fulfilling activities sooner rather than later, and I don't want to wait until I'm 65 to think about that.
Yeah, look, I have to admit that was part of my journey as well. Is that taking that time to realize you're going to be in the workforce for another X number of years. And I looked at my current job and there is no way I'm doing this. So it was a matter of working out which parts did I still love and could I keep doing them till I'm 65, 70. And I could do that now, whereas previously I couldn't. So it's
Hmm.
definitely an important part of the journey.
It's a great trade-off, honestly. So I agree.
So it's difficult. It's particularly in your journey where you've had the corporate experience, then you've realized coaching is the path for you. It's hard to have those moments until you're ready for those moments. But if someone was to follow in your footsteps, if someone was saying, "Hey, actually, I do want to follow this path," is there a quicker way? How would you recommend? What would you recommend they do?
Um, well, I think what I would have appreciated was being able to pursue this while working full time. Now, I think a lot of people um, are thinking to themselves like, "Oh my God, I'm exhausted after a full day's work, and I want to even think about that." Um, but I think if you have identified something that really interests you, um, you sort of take for granted a lot of the security that that sort of steady paycheck does provide. So I would just highly recommend anyone who's looking into like their side hustle or their post retirement sort of activity to think about it now, right? Because it's going to require a whole bunch of different certifications, investments, and all these other things into your education. And I think if you at least you get a head start on it now, you won't be stressed out about it in the future, right? Um, and it's also pretty good to, a lot of times when I think about this sort of coaching journey that I have, right, it probably would have been applicable to a lot of the work that I was doing, in financial services, right? And I think that if you have an opportunity to be able to flex that side hustle within your current environment, I think that's a really good advantage to be able to leverage, if you will, right? Speak to whoever's in charge, your managers or something like that, to be able to sort of um, say, look, I'm interested in trying to pursue this. It might be a little different from what I'm doing, but I would like to at least try to experiment with this. It will build my skill set for the company, and I think it will do well. So I think it's a good strategy to sort of employ sooner rather than later, I would say.
Yeah, one thing that I find these conversations are difficult to have with your manager, and I always recommend pushing for your performance reviews. Push for your feedback from your manager. It can be difficult because some people are quite happy, like, don't give me my performance review, just we'll keep going status quo. But those are the opportunities and the moments where you can raise these options with your manager. So it's a two-way conversation. It's not a sit there and take your feedback. It's your opportunity to say, hey, I'm ready for more. So it can be scary, but if you've got those scheduled moments in your performance review, then it's the perfect place to raise it. And
Yeah.
look, worst they can do is say no. Like at least you tried, right?
Well, I mean, try to find moments, creative moments where your outside of work pursuits can be brought into the office somehow. I mean, like, say your side hustle is like wanting to become a cook, and you're working financial services. Well, when we still went to the office, you could probably bring in like, hey, I experimented with this recipe. What do you think? Right. And then maybe after a while, it's like, oh my God, your lunch looks really good. Did you make that? Can you make that for me? And start building that sort of side hustle that way. Right. There are ways to sort of do these different things within your current environment. It's just that the stress kind of increases when it's the only thing that you have that you're relying upon. So yeah, I would just say, take it while you can, if you will.
Absolutely. I was lucky enough to start my coaching career whilst I was still working full time. And the way I got my exposure through my workplace was I was posting content quite consistently through LinkedIn, forgetting that half of my LinkedIn was the company. So, had quite a lot of exposure to people within the company that I would not normally have had. So, by just doing my side hustle, even though I was doing it still relatively privately, the exposure was there and recognized through my employment as well. So those crossovers are possible.
Mm-hmm.
So what you mentioned your training, but is there any other tools or resources that you find that you couldn't do without? Is there any essential readings or podcasts or books you would recommend?
I'm looking at it right now. There's this book. Should I bring it out here? We could put the title in, in the description or something. But this book was actually very, very helpful for me. It's called Reboot Your Life. I think the reason why it was so helpful was, at that time I was kind of like looking for a blueprint of, taking a sabbatical, understanding like how, and trying to plan for it. And while the book itself is not very inspirational, I mean, there are a lot of stories and examples of a lot of people who have done this sort of thing. I think what it does is that it actually provides a blueprint for what you need to do in a practical sense if you want to take a 6 month or a year long sabbatical. The financial considerations you want to think of, the types of what you want to get out of it, right? Doing a lot of the strategic planning. It's a very, very methodical type of book, if you will, to go on that sort of inspirational journey that you want to be on. I highly recommend that book. I think it was a really, I think it just confirmed a lot of the things that I was doing in my own journey was correct. So any person who's actually considering I think it's a really good book to do. Another book that I felt like, which it seems like it's trendy now, but I read it a couple of years ago, was Atomic Habits. Um, and I think that the whole premise of Atomic Habits is really trying to build routines or having routine when you have a routine, right? Adding smaller things on top of that routine so that they become habits, right? And so I think if you break down every sort of task into smaller tasks that become habitual, I think that is an easy way to create new new pathways of thinking or doing things and things like that. You already know this. I've created a very atomic habit about my fitness journey, so I'm very, very devoted to that. And so I built on top of those different things, other things that are beneficial for my own health. So.
Yeah, I did actually read the book a few years ago as well, but I think I might need to revisit it now. It's a very different mindset to when I first read it, so I
Hmm.
think it's probably more of a benefit to my current situation.
Hmm.
So I think I'll
Hmm.
dive back into that one.
Hmm.
What about any quotes, any mantras, anything that you sort of favorite quotes that you lean on in times to keep you motivated?
um, I don't know if it's about quotes, but the mantra I always have is finding your North Star, right? For those who are unfamiliar, like that North Star is always like the direction that's pointing north, and a lot of sailors and navigators looked for that North Star to find that direction and then calibrate wherever direction they want to be going into. And maybe it's because I'm a very goal oriented type of person, but finding that North Star is really important for me because it's a motivating factor, and it's also something that I want to pursue. It becomes something that I want to pursue. Um, I don't want to toot my own horn, but late last, well, I guess this podcast is meant for tooting horns, so let me do that. So at the end of last year, I participated in my first High Rocks, which is a fitness race. It's very trendy these days, right? So, but the Asia Championships are happening in Hong Kong. It was very, very a big thing. It was at Asia World Expo, and there were like tens of thousands of people there. It was like the atmosphere was really electric, and it was awesome. It was like a very unforgettable experience, and I've now become a convert, and I might be doing this more often. but but the thing was is that the reason why I wanted to do this was because I felt like when I was working out, it just kept on. I didn't really have a goal to work towards. I felt like I was just working out, right? And I felt like I needed something to work towards. It's kind of like with runners with marathons, right? Or all these other things. You kind of want to work towards something, right? And so I pushed myself physically to be able to, get to a point where I could do this race at a it's timed, so at a time where I didn't feel embarrassed. So that was the goal, but ended up being like the whole journey itself was like seeing my body transform, seeing my endurance transform, and being inspirational to other people. It became a really good thing to. It became a really nice thing to do, and so what I learned from that was really that I'm a very obsessive compulsive person when it comes to fitness. But I also learned that it's important for me in my sort of pursuit for things to have that North Star, to have that sort of like middle term goal, long term goal, short term goals to be able to go towards. And so that's my goal for this year. Not another High Rocks yet, but to sort of come up with some strategic goals that I want to pursue for my own business in the short term, medium term, and the long term. So it becomes a little more focused and something that will motivate me to get there.
Yeah, fantastic. We had
Mhm.
one of our other guests had a similar approach. He called it the three horizons. Have your current project, your next project, and then your future project, all ticking away. So that way, when one thing starts coming to an end, the next one's already started. So you never have that sort of moment of not knowing which direction that you're going in. Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah, it was great catching up with you. And uh, see you soon, and maybe grab a coffee as we're both in Hong Kong. So let's do this pretty soon.
If you'd like more information about this podcast or our other guests, please check out coachingbynate.com for more resources and learn how coaching and mentoring can help develop your career.